The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the quiet suburban street. Michael Carter adjusted his tie as he approached his sleek black sedan, the briefcase in his hand a testament to the successful meeting he'd just left. As a prominent civil rights attorney, Michael was used to balancing his calm demeanor with the fierce determination that had earned him a reputation for taking down corrupt systems. Sliding into the driver's seat, Michael let out a satisfied sigh. Today had been a win, a major case settled in favor of a marginalized family against a corporate giant. Little did he know, his evening was about to unravel into a nightmare. As he started the car, the flashing lights of a police cruiser appeared in his rearview mirror. A sharp, sinking feeling gripped him. He had done nothing wrong. No speeding, no illegal turns. Yet here they were. Michael pulled over, his hand steady as he turned off the engine and rolled down his window. He watched the officer, a burly man with a square jaw and an air of arrogance, approach his car. "License and registration," the officer barked, his tone dripping with authority. Michael maintained his composure. "Of course, officer." He reached slowly into his glove compartment for the documents, keeping his movements deliberate. As Michael handed over his license and registration, the officer squinted at him, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" "I'm heading home after a meeting," Michael replied evenly, refusing to let irritation seep into his voice. "Home?" The officer's tone turned condescending. "You don't look like you belong around here." Michael's stomach churned, but he kept his expression neutral. "I assure you, officer, I have every right to be here." The officer's lips curled into a smirk. "Step out of the vehicle." Michael hesitated, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "May I ask what the reason for this stop is?" The smirk vanished, replaced by a glare. "Step out of the vehicle, now." Knowing resistance could escalate the situation, Michael complied, stepping out slowly with his hands visible. Around them, a few curious bystanders began to gather, phones out, recording. "What's in the briefcase?" the officer asked, gesturing toward Michael's car. "Legal documents," Michael answered. "Mind if I take a look?" "Actually, I do mind," Michael said firmly. "Those documents are privileged." The officer's face darkened. "Are you refusing a lawful order?" "I'm asserting my rights," Michael said, his voice calm but unyielding. The officer's response was swift and aggressive. He grabbed Michael's arm, twisting it behind his back. "We'll see about that," he growled. Gasps erupted from the onlookers as Michael was pushed against the car and handcuffed. The scene felt surreal, like a grim reenactment of the very injustices he'd spent his life fighting against. "Is this really necessary?" Michael asked, his voice steady despite the humiliation coursing through him. "You're resisting arrest," the officer said smugly, ignoring the murmurs of protest from the crowd. Michael didn't resist. He didn't struggle. Instead, he locked eyes with a woman holding up her phone, recording every second. Her expression was a mix of anger and sorrow. Michael nodded slightly, silently thanking her for capturing the truth. As he was shoved into the back of the police cruiser, Michael's mind raced. This wasn't just about him. This was about every man and woman who had been silenced, humiliated, and stripped of their dignity by those sworn to protect them. The cruiser pulled away, leaving the growing crowd behind. Michael sat in the back seat, his wrists aching from the too tight cuffs. A storm brewed inside him, not of fear, but of determination. He would not let this stand. The cold steel of the holding cell bars felt as oppressive as the injustice that had landed Michael there. Sitting on the bench, his hands now free of cuffs but still aching, he leaned back against the wall, forcing himself to breathe steadily. His sharp mind churned, dissecting every moment of the arrest. Every detail mattered, every word spoken, every action taken. He'd make sure none of it was wasted. Hours crawled by before the clanging of keys signaled his release. Michael's lawyer, David Rosen, a longtime colleague and friend, strode in with an air of urgency. "Michael," David said, his voice a mix of relief and indignation, "this is outrageous. I'm filing the motion first thing tomorrow." Michael stood, brushing off his suit jacket. "I'm fine, David, but Bradley, Officer Bradley, just made the biggest mistake of his life." David nodded grimly. "Let's get you home first. You'll need rest before we take this on." As they left the station, Michael couldn't ignore the venomous glare from Bradley, who stood leaning against the front desk. The officer's smirk was gone, replaced by a look of pure animosity. "You're lucky we're letting you walk out," Bradley sneered. Michael met his gaze head-on, unflinching. "No, officer, you're lucky I believe in doing things by the book." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Michael turned and walked out, his steps purposeful. Back at his home office, Michael sat before a wall of shelves packed with legal books and case files. A steaming cup of coffee rested beside his laptop. The room was a testament to his dedication to justice, a place where countless cases had been won. He opened a new file on his computer, labeling it Bradley. The name felt heavy, loaded with the weight of the man's blatant abuse of power. Michael began by reviewing the videos circulating on social media. Dozens of clips had been uploaded by witnesses, each one a damning piece of evidence. He watched himself being handcuffed, the officer's aggressive demeanor, the bystanders' shocked reactions. The comments were a mix of outrage and support. Another day, another corrupt cop targeting an innocent black man. Why does this keep happening? This guy's a lawyer? Bradley's done for. Michael couldn't suppress a wry smile at the last comment. Yes, Bradley was indeed done for. Next, Michael started gathering background information on the officer. A few calls to his contacts in law enforcement confirmed what he suspected: Bradley had a history. One of his sources, a retired cop named Frank Delgado, didn't hold back. Bradley's been a problem for years. Complaints of racial profiling, excessive force, even falsifying reports, but the department always swept it under the rug. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? Michael asked, his voice sharp. Frank sighed. The department protects its own. And Bradley? He's got friends in high places. Michael leaned back in his chair, the fire inside him burning hotter. Bradley wasn't just a bad cop, he was a symptom of a rotten system. The next day, Michael met with a local activist group, Justice in Action. Their leader, Angela Miller, greeted him with a firm handshake and an understanding smile. "We've been waiting for someone like you to take Bradley down," Angela said. "He's terrorized this community for years." As they sat in the group's modest office, Angela shared testimonies from people who had been victimized by Bradley. A young mother tearfully recounted how he'd arrested her husband over a broken taillight, turning a minor issue into a traumatic event for their family. An elderly man spoke about being thrown to the ground during a routine traffic stop. Each story added weight to Michael's resolve. "Thank you for sharing these stories," Michael said, his voice steady but emotional. "They deserve justice, and so do all of you." Angela placed a hand on his arm. "You're not alone in this fight. We're behind you all the way." As Michael returned to his office that evening, he received a call from David. "We have a problem," David said. "What now?" Michael asked, his tone wary. "Bradley's trying to spin the narrative. He's claiming you resisted arrest, and his buddies at the station are backing him up. They've even released a statement to the press." Michael clenched his jaw. Let them talk. The evidence speaks for itself. But deep down, he knew this was more than a battle against one man. It was a battle against a system designed to protect people like Bradley. Michael opened his laptop and began drafting the lawsuit. Every word felt like a hammer striking against the foundation of corruption. He wouldn't rest until justice was served, not just for himself, but for every person Bradley had wronged. The fight had only just begun. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with spectators eager to witness the trial that had captured national attention. Reporters crowded outside the courthouse, their cameras flashing as Michael Carter stepped inside, his expression composed and resolute. It wasn't just Michael's fight anymore. The case against Officer Bradley had become a rallying cry for justice, a symbol of resistance against systemic corruption. Michael had spent weeks preparing, building a case so airtight that even the most biased juror couldn't ignore the truth. The trial began with the usual formalities, but the tension in the air was palpable. Bradley sat at the defendant's table, his smug demeanor barely masking his unease. Beside him, his lawyer, a seasoned defense attorney notorious for defending corrupt cops, flipped through a thick stack of papers. Michael's attorney, David Rosen, opened with a powerful statement. "This case is not just about Michael Carter," David began, his voice steady and firm. "It's about accountability. It's about ensuring that those who abuse their power are held responsible. Officer Bradley didn't just target an innocent man, he targeted a community. And today, we will prove it." The prosecution's first witness was a young woman who had filmed the arrest. Her video was one of the most damning pieces of evidence, showing Bradley's aggression and Michael's calm compliance. "Can you describe what you saw that day?" David asked. The woman nodded, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "I saw Officer Bradley pull Mr. Carter over. From the start, he seemed aggressive, like he was looking for a fight. Mr. Carter was calm, respectful, but it didn't matter. Bradley escalated things and arrested him for no reason. The defense tried to rattle her. suggesting she might have misunderstood the situation. But the video was clear. The jury watched in silence as the events unfolded on the screen. Bradley's hostility and Michael's composure undeniable. Over the next few days, witness after witness took the stand, painting a damning picture of Bradley's history. Former victims shared their experiences, their voices trembling with emotion as they recounted the fear and humiliation they'd endured. A single mother described how Bradley had falsely accused her teenage son of theft, leading to his wrongful arrest. An elderly man recounted being thrown to the ground during a routine traffic stop. Each testimony was a reminder of the damage Bradley had caused, not just to individuals but to an entire community. The turning point came when a fellow officer, Detective James Holloway, took the stand. His appearance was unexpected and electrifying, an insider willing to break the code of silence that often protected corrupt officers. Detective Holloway, David began, "Can you tell us about Officer Bradley's conduct within the department?" Holloway hesitated, glancing at Bradley, who glared at him from the defense table. Then, taking a deep breath, he spoke. "Bradley has a history of targeting minorities," Holloway admitted. "There have been numerous complaints against him, but the department always looked the other way. They prioritized loyalty over justice." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, the weight of Holloway's words sinking in. "Why are you coming forward now?" David asked. "Because enough is enough," Holloway said, his voice steady. "We're supposed to serve and protect. What Bradley did to Mr. Carter and countless others is a disgrace to the badge." The defense tried to discredit Holloway, suggesting he was disgruntled or seeking attention, but his testimony, combined with the overwhelming evidence, left little room for doubt. When Michael himself took the stand, he delivered a measured but emotional account of the arrest. "I've spent my career fighting for justice," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But that day, I wasn't a lawyer, I wasn't an advocate, I was just another man being treated as less than human. Officer Bradley didn't see me, he saw his own prejudice, and I refused to let that stand." The courtroom was silent, every word Michael spoke hanging in the air like a challenge. As the trial entered its final days, the defense grew increasingly desperate. Bradley's lawyer argued that his actions were justified, that Michael's behavior had been suspicious, but the evidence told a different story. In his closing argument, David addressed the jury directly. "This isn't just about Michael Carter," he said, his voice steady but impassioned. "It's about every person who has been silenced, mistreated, and stripped of their dignity by those who are supposed to protect them. Officer Bradley thought he was above the law. Today, you have the power to prove him wrong." The jury deliberated for hours, the courthouse buzzing with anticipation. When they finally returned, the atmosphere was electric. "On the count of misconduct, we find the defendant, Officer Bradley, guilty." The words rang out like a victory bell. Michael exhaled, a weight lifting from his chest. Justice had been served, not just for him, but for everyone Bradley had wronged. As the courtroom erupted in applause, Michael stood tall, his resolve stronger than ever. The courtroom victory was more than a personal triumph for Michael Carter, it was a seismic shift in the community. The verdict against Officer Bradley sent shockwaves through the city, igniting conversations about accountability and sparking hope for lasting change. But Michael knew the fight wasn't over. One corrupt officer had been held accountable, but the system that enabled him remained intact. Change would require more than a single court case. It would require sustained effort, advocacy, and unity. The morning after the verdict, Michael sat in his office, staring at the pile of letters and emails that had poured in overnight. They came from strangers across the country, victims of police misconduct, supporters of justice, and people inspired by his stand against corruption. One email caught his attention. It was from Angela Miller, the leader of Justice in Action. Michael. Congratulations on the verdict. This is a victory for all of us, but the work is far from done. We've organized a community meeting tomorrow to discuss next steps. Your voice would mean the world to everyone. Angela Michael responded immediately. He wouldn't just attend, he'd use his platform to push for systemic reform. The meeting was held in the auditorium of a local school, the room packed with people of all ages and backgrounds. Angela stood at the podium, her voice ringing with determination as she outlined the group's goals: better training for officers, independent oversight of police misconduct cases, and stronger protections for whistleblowers like Detective Holloway. When Michael took the stage, the room erupted into applause. He raised his hands, urging everyone to settle. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "This victory belongs to all of us. It's a testament to what we can achieve when we stand together. But we can't stop here. Real change requires action, policy changes, education, and holding those in power accountable. He paused, scanning the crowd. We need to make sure that no one else has to endure what I went through, that no one else has to live in fear of those sworn to protect them. Together, we can build a system that serves everyone, fairly and justly. The room erupted again, the energy palpable. Over the following weeks, the momentum grew. Michael worked closely with Justice in Action, helping to draft proposals for policy changes and organizing workshops on citizens' rights. Detective Holloway, emboldened by the support of the community, began speaking out against corruption within the police force, inspiring other officers to come forward. The media played a significant role in amplifying their efforts. News outlets covered the trial, the community meetings, and the growing movement for reform. Michael became a sought-after speaker, traveling to cities across the country to share his story and advocate for justice. One evening, as Michael prepared for a televised interview, his phone buzzed with a message from Angela. It was a video clip of Bradley being escorted out of the police station in handcuffs, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief. Underneath, Angela had written, "The tide is turning." Michael smiled, but his thoughts quickly turned to the future. Bradley's conviction was a step forward, but the real battle was for systemic change, one that would require constant vigilance and unwavering resolve. Months later, Michael stood before a crowd at a rally organized by Justice in Action. The city had implemented several reforms, including the creation of an independent civilian review board for police misconduct cases. It was a victory, but Michael reminded everyone that the fight wasn't over. "We've made progress," he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. But progress isn't the same as justice. Justice means ensuring that every person, regardless of their race or background, is treated with dignity and respect. It means dismantling the systems that allow corruption to thrive. The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices united in determination. As Michael stepped off the stage, Angela approached him, her eyes bright with pride. "You've done so much, Michael," she said, "but I have a feeling this is just the beginning." Michael nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It is, and we're going to keep fighting, together." The movement they had built wasn't just about holding one officer accountable. It was about creating a future where stories like Michael's were the exception, not the rule. As the sun set over the rally, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead would be long and challenging, but he was ready, for his community, for his family, and for every person who believed in justice. He would keep fighting. The end.